to this week's Cruise Chat. I'm Kathleen Penner, owner of Plenty of Sunshine Travel, and today I'm joined by Kristin. And as you can see, Kristin is from Hurtigruten, and we have met several times. I love meeting with Kristin. If you're watching us on YouTube and you look at our playlist, go back and see all of our other episodes because there's some great information there. But this 99th episode, we're going to be talking about Norway. So over to you, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I think, what better place to discuss than Norway with the original Norwegian coastal voyage. Believe it or not, we have actually been sailing in Norway 129 years.
Wow.
129 years. I mean, that's quite a legacy and something we are very proud of. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to take you through kind of a little bit about where we started as a company and how we started as a company and graduated into, having international guests come on board and be cruise guests along with us as well.
Oh, great.
So we like to say, if you're going to go to Norway, you might as well go with the Norwegians, explore with the experts. Yes. But what makes Norway a very unique country to visit is, of course, like this photo alone, just very, shows very well the literal like peaks and bounds and valleys of what makes up the country of Norway. So second longest coastline in the world after Canada. But what makes it very difficult is, of course, because Norway is made up of a lot of these, to us, very beautiful fjords and mountains and things like that, it actually makes it very difficult for the locals to be able to move between towns and cities and things like that. And if you can believe it, with the entire coastal route that we sail from Bergen down in the south up to Kirkenes in the north, only 3 of those little coastal communities actually connect to the railway system.
Oh, goodness.
And a lot of the places where the coastal communities are, there's no like external roads to get them out, to get them to, the larger cities and things like that. And air travel isn't necessarily, as easy either, because they, of course, can only fly between certain big cities. And then those big cities don't necessarily connect to all the little towns and communities. And there is a lot of coastal communities in Norway as well. So this is where kind of the coastal route came from, this need for a more frequent, what started off originally as a mail route, then graduated into a cargo route, and then further graduated still into a ferry service along the Norwegian coast. So back in 1893, it used to be that, especially for those small communities that lived above the Arctic Circle, like if they wanted to send out, say, a Christmas card to their family who lived in the south, they would have to send it like in the spring, early summer, because, that's how long it would take to actually arrive to their family with the current mail system that they had.
Oh, dear. And I thought Canada Post was slow.
Right, exactly. We've definitely been there, not quite the extremes, but we get it. So they actually had a call out back in 1893 to captains and their vessels to expand this mail route, because especially at that point, there were very few lighthouses above the Arctic Circle. There were, of course, in winter, weather conditions and everything, and the seas get a lot more rough. So that's why things were so infrequent. Just nobody wanted to really kind of risk that for the purpose of sending the mail. Until our first captain, Richard With, came along, and he had a steamship, the DS Vesterälen, and he took on the task of lengthening and expanding this mail route along the Norwegian coast. So first between Trondheim and Hammerfest, and then we added more ships, more captains, and a few years later expanded it to be from Bergen all the way in the south up to Kirkenes in the north. And we were doing this mail route within a 7-day time frame. And considering Norway is the second longest coastline in the world, that was quite a feat to accomplish, being able to sail such a long coastline in 7 days. And we became known as like the express route along the Norwegian coast. And that is actually what the name Hurtigruten means. So Hurtig is fast or express, Ruten means route. And the Norwegians so eloquently pronounce it Hurtigruten. So the G is technically silent. So that's where the name derived from. And then we became sort of this lifeline along the Norwegian coast that helps to connect all of the coastal communities from a ferry service. And we thought, why stop there? Let's expand it and let's bring our international, guests on board to kind of really live and experience the authentic way of the Norwegians.
Wow.
So that's kind of the birthplace of how the original Coastal Express voyage came to be. And right now we currently have 7 ships that sail along this coast because we need to keep a consistent service traveling along the coast to make sure that our local Norwegians, have access to this lifeline of transportation to get them from point A to point B.
And do you still deliver some of the mail that goes along?
We still do mail, we still do cargo. And that's kind of the fun thing is when you're on the ships, you can send your own postcards as well through our ships because we do operate still as post offices. And you can actually see the cargo ships coming on and off in most of the ports of call that we visit, delivering different foods and things like that. We can even, transport cars as well in the belly of our ships for people who are bringing them on to transport, or maybe somebody bought a new car and we're shipping it up to them further along the coast. It's a really neat system to kind of be an outsider now, being really a part of the heart and soul of kind of how the country of Norway functions with us on the coastline.
That's amazing. That's really neat.
And that's kind of exactly why we kind of call it like our story together. Like we are mixing and mingling with our travelers, our tourists. They are coming on board and they are experiencing this authentic way of life on our Norwegian ships. And our ships along the coast, that kind of iconic red, white, and black is very similar to sort of the icons of the yellow taxis in New York or the red, double-decker buses in London. It's that recognizable symbol for people in Norway. And the kind of neat thing is, of course, we have mostly Norwegian and some Scandinavian crew on board, and they remember, their stories as a child that on Sundays, maybe after church, they would go down to the water to wave and see the local Hurtigruten that was sailing by, at the same time every day. So there really is kind of a lot of history that ties into just people's upbringings in Norway, that for them, this is just such a static symbol and something kind of this feeling of home, watching our ships sail up and down the coast. Really, really nice stories behind it. And of course, for us, I mean, as you know, we did a talk on sustainability, and that is something we do weave throughout the fabric of all of our ships, the company, and making sure that, we are operating in the most sustainable way possible. So we're actually going through the hybrid electric upgrade with our coastal ships currently. We just put Richard With back on the water, and she is a new hybrid powered, electric powered ship. And we do things like our Green Stay program on board. So our guests can, choose to opt out of having their room serviced. And that, of course, helps us save on energy, electricity, laundry detergents, water, things like that. And we make a donation on their behalf to the Hurtigruten Foundation for each night that they opt out of having their room serviced. And we actually put a goal in place that by 2030, we will have our very first zero emissions coastal ship sailing along the Norwegian coast. And I think that's one thing I love about, being part of the Hurtigruten culture is that, it's not just words and statements and things like that. It's the type of company that puts their words into action and makes the plan happen. And so 2030, we will have our first zero emission ship on the water. And why that's important.
Far off. It really isn't.
It's really not. I mean, especially too, we think of how quickly time seems to be going these days. So we're very, very thrilled that, this will be our reality very soon. But just kind of to mention, like this photo here, this is the Geysir Fjord. And what is actually going to happen is by the year, I believe it's 2025, could be 2026, they will actually not allow ships to be sailing in the Geysir Fjord if they are running on any type of emissions. So this will actually change sort of the cruising game in future, because of course different countries are looking at protecting, parts of their environment, of course.
And rightfully so, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
And so Geysir Fjord, this is one that will change in the cruising game in the next few years, because they will only allow ships that are, sailing on electric power, sailing zero emissions into the Geysir Fjord. Yeah. So that's, something I think we are starting to see more and more of throughout the world, is wanting to protect these amazing places, yes. That we up to this point have been so fortunate to see. And like part of sustainability too comes to, not just people's interactions with the environment, but people's interactions with the community. And what makes sort of Hurtigruten special in Norway is we do offer the largest marine apprenticeships in the company. So we actually have a lot of people, fresh out of school wanting to learn about, becoming a deck officer or, an engineer. They actually come and do their apprenticeships on Hurtigruten. And, we hope they'll stay with us afterwards when they're ready to graduate and dive into their career. And many of them do. But we are, a massive employer throughout the country of Norway for people pursuing this as a career. So it's nice to know that, we have that ability to provide people with a livelihood in their day to day. And also too, we are, the largest customer of a lot of the small businesses along the Norwegian coast. Because when we talk from a food perspective, let me see, it is here. It was the next slide, thankfully. Because speaking from a food perspective on the Coastal Express is we have that concept of Norwegian coastal kitchen, sourcing our food locally, getting our food from the local suppliers, the local farmers. There is literally towns where we know where we pick up the eggs, that are picked from, all of their chickens that morning, and they meet us at the dock, and they know the timing of when our ships are coming, and we're getting our eggs from this particular family's farm. So we are a massive customer to a lot of the small businesses along the Norwegian coast. And of course, by sourcing that food locally throughout the coast, it of course reduces the food miles that it has to travel to get from, we're not shipping anything internationally to source our food. So it's kind of that literally farm to table or farm to ship sort of concept. And what a great way for our guests then to be experiencing the fresh catch of the day, or, the king crab that they went out and did an excursion to catch and are literally enjoying that later that afternoon.
And you can really taste the difference. I know personally with eggs, because we have backyard chickens, but the yolk is so much darker and the egg just tastes better. So having this fresh, literally, days old kind of thing is amazing. It's so great that you do that.
Exactly. And that's, again, it's like twofold. It's a benefit for our guests on board because it's just an extra level of destination immersion that they get to enjoy. And then of course it's a benefit to the livelihood of the small businesses along the Norwegian coast. Because believe it or not, I haven't told you how many ports we actually visit yet. But I'll share that number in a couple slides, because people are usually like, oh, I don't get it. So, but just to let you know, within a 7-day route, like just in the northbound or in the southbound, 15 of the ports, and you're already thinking that's too many ports for 7 days or 6 days, but 15 of those ports is where we are sourcing our food from. So at least, twice a day, we are getting, fresh food from whatever small little town that we're in, which is incredible.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
So it really, again, kind of ties into sustainability and not just from a people and an environment perspective, but, sustaining the economy and the businesses and the local livelihoods along the coast as well.
Yes, makes a difference.
So here's where we talk about the ports.
Goodness.
So
yeah.
the full round trip voyage, if you did Bergen, Kirkenes, Bergen round trip, we visit 34 ports. And that's not just 34 ports in 12 days. It's 34 north and it's 34 south.
Wow.
And you're probably thinking the math doesn't add up in terms of, okay, if we're, 12 days and you're hitting those 34 ports twice, like how are you fitting all of this in?
Right.
More so from a cruise guest perspective. And so when you actually take a look at the schedule, you can actually see that some of the tinier towns that we are in, we might literally have a 15 to 20 minute stop. And so obviously that port is not meant for, guests to be out doing touristy things.
Right.
That is for a quick cargo, shipment, taking things on, putting things off, and a ferry stop as well. So we might have some locals hopping on our ship. But from a cruise guest perspective, we would remain on board. And it's kind of neat actually just to be standing on the top deck and watching this happen, watching this shift, because it's like timed like clockwork, because we are at the end of the day a ferry route. We stick to a very kind of perfectly timed schedule, and everything is timed accordingly for when the Hurtigruten ship comes in, cargo gets switched off, and we continue along our way.
Wow, that's great.
But when we're in our larger cities, places like Trondheim, Tromsø, Alesund, we do build in, that opportunity for, we could be staying there maybe a morning or an afternoon for our guests to get off and have, more time for further exploration. We have an optional shore excursion program where our guests can take advantage of that and do, some maybe further inland trips to learn a little bit more and see a little bit more. But what we can also do as well is we can actually disembark our guests in one port. The ship will continue along the route that it needs to follow. We will go away with our guests and, maybe go look closer at a town or a community, or go and visit maybe something about our Sami culture. And then we will actually rejoin with that excursion further up along the coast and re-meet the ship at a different port of call. So that's how we keep, the ferry system still going, but we can still have our guests enjoying, parts further inland along the coast of Norway. So it's this very like seamless, perfectly timed experience for both our cruise guests and our local Norwegians that are using us as a transportation service as well.
Yeah, wow.
Because you might even see like what's kind of neat is like for our guests, they might actually see like an entire soccer team that's coming on because they're using us to get, to their next match, or a school trip where, they're using the Hurtigruten as the way to get, maybe to one of the museums or things like that they're visiting. So it really is a unique way to kind of mix together local culture and, international travel for our Canadian guests on board, for example.
That's amazing.
So within that 12-day round trip, we do have 3 itineraries that you could technically take with it. So we have a 7-day north. So this is from Bergen up to Kirkenes. And this would be more for people who are, we like to call them the culture connoisseurs. So maybe they're a little bit more interested in, culture, museums, art galleries, understanding Norway a bit more from that perspective. That would be the recommendation. Take the 7-day north itinerary. And if you're taking it in winter time, actually, it doesn't even matter now what time of year you take it, because Kirkenes, there is, we have an optional post program, or you could do it as a pre-program if you do the southbound route. called the Snow Hotel. We have a great partnership with them, and they have a year-round snow hotel, ice hotel. They have found a way to build this hotel so that it sustains 365 days a year. It used to be just available in the winter, and they've actually created and found a way to keep this snow hotel alive all year round. So it's kind of a neat little pre or post program that you can do once you're up in Kirkenes.
Amazing.
And then if you're looking for a little bit more of that connection to nature, you know, more time spent in the Vesterälen and Lofoten Islands, then we recommend taking the 6-day South Voyage. This is kind of a perfect way to get a great overview, I think, of that imagery we all have of, you know, these beautiful towering mountains and small little fishing villages and things like that. This is a great opportunity. Now, of course, if you have the full 2 weeks, you could also just do the full 12-day round trip voyage. And kind of a little rule of thumb, because of course you're seeing, you know, how many ports north and how many ports south. So the rule of thumb is what you see during the day going north is what you will see at night coming south, and vice versa. So what you see during the day coming south is what you see at night going north. So that's also kind of a nice way. If you can't do the full 2-week trip, that might be a way to help you determine whether you do 7-day or 6-day, because maybe there are certain towns or cities that you want to be seeing during the day. So that might dictate, do you go north or do you go south? But kind of a unique thing, like in a city like Tromsø, for example, a large town that people think, oh my gosh, you know, you want to see that during the day. One of the unique things that we actually do at night is we have an exclusive trip just for Hurtigruten guests. We're the Arctic Cathedral. And if you've ever seen a photo of it, it's this beautiful kind of just A-frame peaked cathedral, and it just totally lights up the entire kind of waterway there. We do a midnight concert. They open up the church just for our Hurtigruten guests, and they put on a midnight concert. So, you know, there's kind of little tips and tricks and things like that, is why north, why south? And if you can do both, you're gonna get it all if you do the full 12-day voyage.
Yeah, there's no missing out when you do the 12
exactly. Because what we tend to find too, especially for, you know, our guests who maybe have only done it one way, we tend to get them back in a couple of years doing the opposite route that they didn't do, because they sort of felt like they were just missing, you know, maybe a little something that they were hoping to have seen. So maybe it's a nice way for us to get them back as well, is if you just start with one of the north or the southbound crossings. But one thing that is very much part of kind of our ceremonial history on our coastal ships is, of course, the Arctic Circle crossing, because you're going to experience it whether you take the north or the southbound route. But we switch up the Arctic Circle ceremony depending if you're traveling north or south with us. So on the northbound route, we have our guests gather up on the top deck of our ships, and we are paid a visit by King Neptune. And King Neptune will come and, you know, share his speech that he will bless us with calm seas for the rest of our voyage if our guests can complete a task. And the task or challenge that our guests are faced with is having a scoop of polar water dumped down their back, usually by our captain or by King Neptune himself. So we pose this challenge to our guests. Of course, it is completely optional, but it is an absolute blast. If you don't participate, it's just as much fun watching it happen.
The expressions, right?
Exactly. I think their faces really, you know, showcase just how cold that water is. So this is kind of the ceremonial part that we do on board to commemorate for our guests that they have crossed the Arctic Circle. Because I think too, you know, when we all come to sort of ticking off those lists of what we've accomplished, I think crossing the Arctic Circle is on people's lists.
Absolutely.
You know, I myself, once I crossed the Arctic Circle, I was like, well, now I got to go and cross the Antarctic Circle. You can't do one and not the other. So it's kind of neat how it can like help your list expand of things you want to accomplish. So the little globe that you see at the top there, that is actually the marker. It is located on a little island, and the Arctic Circle line of latitude crosses through this. So of course, when you're sailing during the daytime, you can see the marker, and we like to do this ceremony around that.
Oh, what fun.
Now,
yes.
If you're now I got to ask, would you do it, Kathleen?
I do it.
The water down your back? Awesome.
I would have no problem with that. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fun.
So now if you're sailing with us on the southbound route, or if you're doing the full round trip, we do give you two different ceremonies. The challenge here is to take a shot of cod liver oil. Yeah. And now this is something
that's harder to agree to, but
yeah, this is something where the Norwegians quite commonly take this day to day just for their own, health and well-being. It tastes absolutely terrible. Like you can now buy flavored versions of cod liver oil.
Where's the fun in that?
But exactly the challenge on board is you taste the original cod liver oil, and so you get your commemorative Hurtigruten spoon. And they pour the shot of cod liver oil for you, and then you take your swig of it, and it is just absolutely vile stuff. It kind of leaves this like fishy taste in your throat.
Yep.
So now would you take that challenge?
Absolutely not. I'll be taking pictures.
Yeah, there we go. We always get people one or the other. They don't always necessarily want to do both. But again, it's just kind of a fun, creative way to get all of our guests together and enjoying, the ceremonial opportunity of crossing the Arctic.
I don't know why I had in my brain it would be like kiss the fish or something like that.
Yeah, kind of like the Newfie screeching in. It's kind of our version of that. I think. Right. But I'm not sure what tastes better, the screech or the cod liver oil. So,
and you've done it, have you?
I have done both, yes. Okay. And it is. And the funny thing is, I think too, because when I was on board, they knew I worked for the company. They gave me 2 spoonfuls of it, and oh my goodness, it was just absolutely vile stuff. And and I purchased a glass of champagne afterwards to help chase that down, because the throat clear. It was awful stuff, but all in good fun and a nice way to help our guests commemorate the crossing of the Arctic Circle.
It's definitely a memory. Yep.
Yes, definitely. Now, because we sail in Norway all year round, and you're probably thinking like, oh my goodness, why would you sail all year round? Because most, like, the cruising season tends to be summer. People take advantage of the fjords, but there's kind of something special about each part of the season. And you could literally come and do, spring or summer sailing with us, or do winter cruising with us, and you would have a completely different experience. Again, it's all these ways of being able to bring guests back and do it again.
Absolutely.
So the spring season, it's actually quite a nice time to go, because of course, as we know, the crowds are a lot less in spring. But we're starting to kind of see that mix between winter and spring, where there's still the beautiful, kind of snow-capped mountains, but they're starting to melt. The temperatures are warming up, that it's comfortable, and we start to see a lot of the spring bloom happening as well. And but the funny thing is, when you're actually traveling along the coast, you could really experience 3 different seasons in one, because when you're further down in Bergen, you're going to get those warmer, maybe even almost summer-like temperatures. And then as you're sailing further north, you're going to start getting into kind of the cooler spring temperatures. And then as you get into Kirkenes, you're still going to have kind of those wintry feeling tight temperatures. And this all can happen just in the spring season.
And you provide the jackets though, correct?
On coastal, we don't provide the jackets.
You don't?
No, that's something we do just for our expeditions. So there is kind of, but it's kind of the same concept for packing for expedition versus packing for coastal. If you're doing, especially these seasonal, where you could experience the cooler temperatures, a lot of base layers. And Norwegians, they love the merino wool. It is kind of the perfect thing to be wearing for, these types of temperatures, and kind of heating yourself up quickly, but not with too many heavy layers. So another kind of popular reason to travel with us in the springtime is we have our Norway Constitution Day, and that is on May the 17th. And that's where like everybody in Norway, kind of exactly like our Canada Day, they all come out, they are dressed in, their local, just, I think they call them bunads, just local dress, and are just out for a day of celebration, waving their Norwegian flags. And we, of course, emulate the same type of celebration on our ships and when we're in the different ports and things like that. So it's just such a great kind of time to be traveling with Hurtigruten, because it's such a time of celebration in the ports on our ships. And, there's always some great culinary delights that our chef comes up with, so that our guests can experience even more kind of the Norwegian specialties on board. So really great time to travel and not be in the more typical kind of peak period, which is summer. And in the spring period, so each time of the year, there's kind of different fjord systems that we go through because of the ability to access them, because we can actually get in. And two, there's just a certain charm about seeing them at different times of the year. So one of the main fjord systems we go through in the springtime is the Lingen Fjord. And just again, the beautiful backdrop of the mountains, the small little town. It's such a special place to be able to sail through with our guests.
And it's beautiful. I love the snow-capped mountains too.
Isn't it? And that's the thing. I think too, you almost look for that kind of thing when you're traveling to Norway a little bit. So when we go into the summertime, of course, we get into your midnight sun, and that is your 24 hours of daylight, especially when you're up above the Arctic Circle. The sun just does not set, which can throw people off a little bit, I think. But of course, that's an opportunity to have longer periods out in port as well. Whereas if you're traveling with us in the fall and maybe some of the evening stops, it's already dark, maybe you feel less inclined to go out. But when the sun is still shining, it's that opportunity to be like, well, hey, why don't I go out and kind of embrace this and enjoy it? So one of the highlights of the summer sailing season is, of course, the Geysir Fjord. And we travel through the Geysir Fjord from June 2nd through to the end of August on the northbound route. So again, when you're picking, do I go north versus south if you can't do the full 12-day? The fjords are sometimes people's, reason as to why they do one versus the other. And then we also have, this is my favorite fjord, the Trollfjord. And so we will attempt to travel, because safety is a little bit more inclined here, between May and September. And we do this on both routes. But what makes Trollfjord so special is literally seeing just how narrow it is. And this, kind of just showcases, it almost looks like the bow of the ship is just as wide as the actual Trollfjord. And this particular fjord, it's not that long and it's not very wide, but our captains love to go into it just sort of as a way to kind of show off to our guests and give them that perspective of almost feeling like you could literally reach out and touch the sides. This is how close we get to the edge of the cliff. And being able to see, the melt happening from the snow in the summertime creates a lot of fantastic waterfalls that come down the sides. So our captains will take the ship in, and they'll do maybe a 360 or two, just to show off a little bit and give our guests this chance to like really be up close before coming out and continuing along the route. And what was actually kind of neat is we have an internal, Facebook group for Hurtigruten where captains can share things and stuff. And I actually just saw that and we're into November, and we're getting into the darker season now, where the sun will set for almost a full 2-month period. And they actually still went into the Trollfjord with massive spotlights as their
Oh,
way to kind of see going in
to
and
show
still spun
everybody.
around to come
Oh,
out. So although, you know, we kind of only say we can really do it May to September,
mhm.
if conditions are on our side and our captain feels it's safe, some of them
You're gonna do it.
still do attempt to do it even after that season as well, which is a ton of
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, that's
And I think
great.
that's kind of just like the history of our heritage and our captains along the coast. I mean, we're into like fourth generation, you know, captains now. Their father's father were
Mhm.
captains with Hurtigruten along the Norwegian coast. So it's such a cool experience
It
to be able
is. Yeah.
to
And
enjoy.
it's beautiful to see the melt coming right down and
Exactly. And that's a big highlight, you know, going in the summertime. And that's where, you know, why there is so much cruising in the fjords during the summertime,
mhm.
because of course all of that melt is happening from the mountains, which is causing, you know, a lot of these waterfalls to become a lot heavier and thicker, and, you know, a lot more of a kind of constant stream of water. It's
Yes.
pretty cool.
Mhm.
So when we get into your autumn season, again, you're starting to get out of, you know, the heavier tourist time of year, and you get into the chance of potentially seeing the Northern Lights.
Mhm.
That can kind of start. The funny thing is, actually, this season it actually started even as early as end of August.
Oh, wow.
Going into September, it gets stronger. The peak period, of course, is between October and March, and we'll talk about that.
Mhm.
But autumn, I mean, they go through sort of a similar shift in, you know, their foliage like we do in Canada.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, you know, we're used to these seasonal cruisings, especially Canada, New England, because of the fall foliage. Norway is, I mean, no offense, Canada, but Norway is just as equally beautiful in the fall period as well, because they go through a lot of that same color change
Mhm.
as well. So it can be kind of the new way to experience fall foliage by cruising,
Absolutely. Yeah.
going through Norway. And then
Mhm.
in Norway, we in the fall, we swap out the Geysir Fjord for the Jøren Fjord. And some say that it might even rival the
Mhm.
beauty, the spectacle of going through the Geysir Fjord. So Jøren Fjord is what we experience in September.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny because I think Geysir is the one that, you know, people know that name. When they go to
Mhm.
Norway, they figured that's what I want to go and see.
Yes. Okay.
And so I've had a few, you know, guests just ask me about fall, and they were disappointed that they weren't going to go and see Geysir. And I said, don't be disappointed. The
Mhm.
fact that you're able to go into Jøren Fjord, I promise you, you're going to have just as memorable, if not more so, an experience here.
Mhm.
And it's so nice that hearing their impressions
Mhm.
after they've come back, they were just like, oh my gosh, you were absolutely right. It is just as stunning
Yeah.
to be going through the Jøren Fjord. And what's nice here is this is not visited by the other cruise lines, because of course in Geysir, you know, it's a heavy cruise area in the
Mhm.
summertime. In the fall, going through Jøren Fjord, it's just us and the fjord, and it's off the kind of beaten track.
Mhm.
So it's not part of anybody else's route, and it really is. There's something special about being able to say that you've gone here.
And I love
So
the still water. Like you can just tell it's just peaceful because of all the reflections, right? Like there's
exactly.
nothing and
And
it's
there's
oh,
so
I
many
love it.
mountains just kind of protecting that area as
Mhm.
well. Because I mean, how often do we notice, you know, once you go out into open ocean, you know, conditions can very easily change. And part of why we spend much time cruising in and around the fjord area is because the mountains can really protect us from a lot of. So the winter season, this is where we travel, sort of October to
Ooh.
March timeframe,
Mhm.
where it's the best opportunity to be able to see the Northern Lights. And what better way than to be attempting to see the Northern Lights on a Hurtigruten ship, because
Mhm.
it's almost like your own little moving observatory. So we, you know, of course, we will still spend our time in ports, but then we have that ability to move away from the city lights. We
Right.
can move away and be under
All that
just
light pollution. Yeah.
exactly. So it gives us that chance to just be, you know, under the stars, under a blank, you know, dark sky, which of
Mhm.
course increases our ability to see the Northern Lights. And of the 34 ports of call that we visit, 22 of them are located above the Arctic Circle. And of course, being above the Arctic Circle heightens your opportunity to see the Northern Lights even more. So it's such a fantastic time, to really have the aim of going to see the Northern Lights. So much so that we do have a Northern Lights promise. So if you are sailing with us on the full 12-day voyage, and you do not see the Northern Lights, we give you the opportunity to travel with us for free on the following winter season on either a free 7-day north or 6-day southbound.
Okay.
And now the funny thing is, like, when we talk about not seeing the Northern Lights, it's not because you chose to stay in bed and not go out and view them. Because what will happen when you're on board is you have the ability to allow announcements into your room or not. And one of the advantages of allowing the announcement into your room is if the captain or the bridge team sees the Northern Lights at like 2 o'clock in the morning, they will make an announcement over the ship. And if you have your little announcement button on in your ship, in your room, that announcement will come through, and that will give you the chance to go up and, experience the Northern Lights. So we say, if you're the one who chose to sleep through that and not go up and witness the Northern Lights, that doesn't count as you not seeing the Northern Lights. A Northern Lights sighting is something that is documented by the bridge, by the captain. And so they will be able to tell, our shoreside call center team whether or not Northern Lights sightings did happen. And I actually had that experience on board where it literally, now thankfully it wasn't as late into the evening as 2 a.m. But I'd probably gone to bed around 10:30, and a call came through by about 12:30 in the morning that the bridge had spotted the Northern Lights. And so I remember my husband and I looking at us, and we're like, we gotta go. And we're in our pajamas and everything like that. So you're like pulling your boots and, kind of your waterproof pants over your pajamas and your jacket over your pajamas and throwing on a toque and mitts, because it's like, how can you not experience the Northern Lights? And,
absolutely.
And so it was quite funny to be up on the top deck, because some people didn't quite go to the effort that we did in dressing up. So they're just up there in their little, nightgown or something like that.
Cold.
Oh my gosh. But I think that's the thing. It's just this like unexpected excitement of like, oh my gosh, the Northern Lights are out. We need to go out and see it. So
beautiful.
Very, very cool. And so what kind of happens as well in the winter season? So between November 21st and January 21st, Norway goes through, especially above the Arctic Circle, polar night. So literally 24 hours of darkness between this 2-month period. Below the Arctic Circle, they kind of go through this blue light period at the same time, where there's just kind of this blue glow in the sky. The sun's not really up for much more than maybe an hour or two. And when I say up, it's really just kind of hovering above the horizon. And so again, it's kind of the reason, plan when and where and why you want to go when you do to Norway, because there's these little idiosyncrasies, per season, even within a season, that can dictate kind of, I get it, two kind of month periods of darkness above the Arctic Circle. But the flip side to it is it's like constant opportunity to,
look at your view, right? Yeah. And that's why, you work with a travel advisor, because you can go through your bucket list, and we can sort of say, okay, if you want to get all these checks, this is the best time to go, kind of, and give you windows.
And because what I don't think people realize about Norway, because I think first people think of like fjords with Norway, and I don't think they realize the changes in, kind of the light and the dark that happen. And so, I've seen people booking into end of November, into early December, and coming back and being like, I had no idea it was like going to be pitch black. I'm like, you probably didn't speak with a travel agent, did you?
Huge difference.
There is, it really does make a difference depending the time of year you go. And even still, people, like, it throws them off to have the 24 hours of daylight as well. It can go the opposite direction in the summertime. So that's why it's so important to work, with someone like you, Kathleen, where it's like you can share the ins and outs and the whys of, why would you go during a different time of year, where the
just
conditions
to make sure
and the weather,
that you get the best vacation possible, right?
Exactly.
And you get all those check marks.
Exactly. Because as you and I were speaking previously, that may be the one and only time you go to that destination, so that's why you're there, to make sure that it's, they're going to get the optimal, moments that they are seeking in that destination. So one concept that is very Norwegian is friluftsliv. And I probably don't do it justice with my very Canadian way of saying it.
But you did it better than I would have.
Yeah, but friluftsliv is sort of the Norwegian way of life, the connection to the outdoors, and living life by being outside. And that very much carries through to, the theme of cruising along the Norwegian coast and enjoying and embracing what Mother Nature has given us. And so we do offer a hiking program throughout the summer season and into kind of early fall as well, where our coastal experience team will take our guests up into, some of the mountains to do some hikes. And what's kind of neat just in the day-to-day lives in Norway is Norway is free to explore. You can pretty much go hiking, stay overnight wherever you choose. If you did want to camp, the only kind of rule when it comes to camping anywhere in Norway is if you are staying within 150 meters of someone's home and you want to stay more than 2 nights, you have to knock on their door and ask if it's okay if you camp there for longer than a 2-night period. But otherwise, the country is open for you to be enjoying everything at your will,
So they're really gracious hosts then, just
very much so. I mean, can you imagine just someone knocking on your door? Do you mind, if I just camp here for a week or so?
Like, it's a tent on your front lawn.
Right.
Goodness. Wow.
So it's just, maintaining obviously the respect with the people that do actually, live in areas close to where you might be camping, but just that ability of being able to kind of freely go hiking in and around the country is pretty incredible. And this is where our coastal experience team comes into play. And they are the ones that are helping our guests to understand, the culture, the history, the science behind life in Norway. And they are taking our guests out and doing, hikes and things like that. And yes, even to the point of, they'll bring thermoses of hot coffee or hot chocolate so that at the end of a hike, we can all gather around and enjoy a hot drink afterwards if it's in colder temperature time frames. And they help our guests, organize their optional excursions and things like that. So they're sort of the lifeblood of, between our guests and the ship experience and being on land. They rally everybody together. And they all are, local Norwegians. And again, same thing, have grown up with stories of seeing our ships along the coast. And, for them, it's actually turned into their career. And sharing those stories with our guests, which is such a unique experience. And they are there. And as I said, they work with a lot of our local tour guides and local tour companies to help our guests explore further. So we have over 60 different suppliers that we work with in Norway to give our guests options of further exploration that they can do with us. And of course, if you are looking at, winter time, traveling with us, there's so many highlights in terms of the ability to go dog sledding. Those activities tend to happen December 15th or later in the winter season. So although the sailing season in winter starts a little bit earlier, they don't actually get enough snow, in certain parts of Norway until kind of that mid to late December onwards, where you can start to do activities like, dog sledding, things like that. And of course, when the, summer temperatures are out there, it of course expands our opportunities to be doing more hikes and things like that. And again, it's like how many opportunities where we can still see our ship sailing, continuing its route, but we are, up in the cliffs doing some hikes, and we'll meet up with that ship at a later point. It really is quite an impressive, seamless way that all of those little moving parts connect, so that everybody can still see the country, but the ship can still continue on the route that it needs to. So as I mentioned, we have 7 ships along the Norwegian coast. One of those ships we will be plucking out, and she will actually be part of a special project that you and I think we'll talk about maybe in a few weeks' time.
Yes, absolutely.
And so this gives our guests the opportunity to, almost every other day or so, be able to hop on a Hurtigruten ship, and no matter where they live, to be able to move themselves around and use this as the local transportation. And for our guests, it gives you a lot of flexibility as well. Even if you're thinking of just doing, our smaller 7 or 6 day itineraries, because you have a larger land program built around it. The nice thing is, we're not typically a Saturday to a Saturday departure or anything like that. It gives you so many different ship choices to be able to fit it in with a bigger land program as well. So it kind of opens up a lot more flexibility for when and how you can fit, kind of a Hurtigruten itinerary into a bigger trip that you might be doing.
Right. And I love that you have that flexibility there, because you have so many ships that you can really create your own. And make that's your vacation yours. Yeah,
exactly. And like, Kathleen, for you, you could build this grand, kind of further trip where it can expand into Sweden or Finland or wherever, your clients may want to go, that it gives them a nice way to experience different parts of the destination by land, by ship, etc. So yeah, it's kind of a neat way to build a bigger package as well.
Absolutely.
And of course, the purpose of the ships, especially because our locals use it, as their main mode of transportation to get from point A to point B along the coast, we want our ship to feel homey, and feel like it's your home away from home while you're at sea. And again, throwing out the Norwegian words, our ships have a feeling of koselig, and that means this sense of coziness. So of course, being a Norwegian company, we bring in a lot of the Scandinavian design, your modern clean lines, your soft lighting, your kind of pops of color accents, but your kind of palette remains neutral, sort of this calming, effect when you're in, when you're on vacation. And we carry that concept through to, the staterooms as well. Those light colored woods that just kind of give you a bit of that sense of like, it almost kind of has that look and feel of a sauna too, which is very Norwegian. Our ships have that on board. But just, and the nice warm cozy blankets on the beds, and that carries through to our restaurants as well. And just, the lounge is meant to feel like your living room. The dining room is meant to feel like, your kitchen. We have our cafe upstairs that's kind of just like what you could go and experience if you were going to experience a local cafe in the town that you live in. It's just kind of tying community and that sense of home right onto your ship as well, which is very nice. Beautiful. And lots of faux fireplaces and things around as well, which just kind of adds to that coziness. And then just to finish off, so next year, July 2nd, we will be celebrating 130 years with Hurtigruten. July
Exciting.
2nd,
Wow, that's a
2023.
big milestone. Yeah.
It's a very big milestone and something we are super, super proud of as a company. And, I had talked about how that one ship is going to be pulled away for something special. And we have a couple sort of new ways to experience the coast with that ship that will be in celebration of our 130th. But we will save that for another time and
When
another
we're closer
chat.
to the time. Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I love that. Thank you. Wow.
So that is kind of, a 129-year, history in a big nutshell, and just a different way of cruising. I mean, there's nothing else like that concept in the world. So it's a very neat way to experience the country, maybe differently than you might have envisioned,
Right. Yeah,
with
but you're so immersed in it. It's so, you get the feel of the country. I think
exactly.
sometimes there's a lot of cruises that kind of, we're there for 4 hours and we take off, and you don't really get to get the feel of where you're visiting.
Yeah.
And you definitely are immersed in the Norwegian culture this way. And I think that's so much better.
I agree. And I think too, it's not always about just what happens on shore as well. Like all of the fabric of kind of the Norwegian way of life is woven onto everything that happens on ship as well. So it just gives this great, destination immersion for our guests to really understand sort of what it means to live and work, in the country of Norway, and in such a stunning country as well.
Yes. Oh, it is absolutely gorgeous. It's been on my list for so many years. And this summer, I'm getting close. I'm going to Copenhagen and then over to Iceland. So I'm just so close.
Oh, you're like just missing it. We're going to have to take care of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's like, I can see it and I want to be there. But yeah, well, thank you so much for putting all of that together. It's absolutely fabulous. Make sure you guys reach out, because I want to get you on board so that you can experience Norway as well. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Always a pleasure.
Yes. Okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Take care. Have a great day.
I hope you enjoyed this week's cruise chat with Kristin from Hurtigruten. It was really cool to see how they started as a company. I think it was really neat that they started with the mail and then expanded into cargo and then worked into passengers and transporting Norwegians, and then of course us. So that's really neat to see the evolution of how they kind of grew and started as a company. And I think that's really, really cool. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is episode 99. Next week, I really, really hope that you've subscribed to our channel. So next week, I'm going to be doing something incredibly special with Virgin Voyages. And I am going to be offering you guys up to $1,300 of onboard credit if you book within a certain time frame and you invite some people, or if you go alone, you're still going to get a whole lot of onboard credit. It's just incredible. Make sure you tune in next week, episode 100. I am super stoked, super excited. Can't wait to have you, because I wouldn't be doing this without you guys. And I'm really, really happy that you're able to follow along with me and to do it. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. It means the world to me. It's because of you I have 100 episodes, and I'm so glad to bring all of the cruising to you all. And it just means the world to me. So thank you. Thank you so, so, so much. So make sure you've subscribed, tune in next week, and we'll see you guys. Have a great week. I can't wait to show you next week. Goodbye, everybody.